Happy Friday, everybody out there. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast as we get ready for the weekend. All of you getting ready for the weekend as we talk little hoops on this Friday following the day after we got the schedule, of course, dropping during the show. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us on this Friday, but we have a lot to talk about here with the Eastern Conference in general. Here with us, as always, Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna's here. So are you on a Friday as everybody's getting ready to head down to the shore or getting ready to go on vacation or just leaving work early, whatever it might be. You hang out with us, and we really appreciate it. Paolo Banchero, yesterday, is one of the teams that I mentioned, the Orlando Magic, as I'm very interested in when it comes to the 76ers for this upcoming season. We generally put the same teams in the mix at the top with the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, Philadelphia 76ers. In some way, shape, or form, we include the Milwaukee Bucks. We don't disrespect the Cleveland Cavaliers, but we have now started to respect the Orlando Magic and saying, hey, we got to pay attention to those young guys, what Jamal Mosley is doing there, adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as a big offseason addition. That's the team to watch as a squad that may take that next jump. So Paolo Banchero earlier today on ESPN discussing where he believes his team is, the organization, and he says that, as I quote it, I think we should easily be a top 4, top 3 team and have a chance to win the East, right up there with the Celtics, Knicks, and Sixers. The teams that he did not mention, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and maybe even a few more that I want to leave for Derek and Kyle to get into and all of you on the chat. But as we look at that and we talk about that, we can get into the Orlando Magic piece a little bit more, even though we discussed it quite a bit yesterday in the pointing out of how much I wanted to see them. I still think the Sixers are better. He feels like they're in the mix, but they are better. Who do you fear, though, in the Eastern Conference? Derek did talk about the Boston Celtics quite a bit yesterday. Kyle was mentioning the New York Knicks and how they look and what they might look like overall. But who for you out there, I'm still going to ask these guys the same question, do you fear? Or should the Sixers have a healthy level of respect for this upcoming 24?
Yeah, I mean, if the Sixers are actually
campaign,
scared of anyone, then we have bigger problems here, right?
Right.
So it's more, fear is more for
that's a fun,
our perspective.
Fun word to use.
For the fans' perspective, maybe super producer Bree's perspective. But yeah, I do agree that if the Sixers are actually afraid of anybody, we have lost the plot before 100%. The season has even started.
100%. Healthy amount of respect for what teams in the Eastern Conference that you just simply cannot dismiss as we get ready for the start of the campaign. So, Derek, I'll ask you first. When you look at these teams, we've talked about Boston and New York quite a bit. Certainly, we'll get to them and maybe even just start with them. But where are you?
Well, I think we'll just start this off with, you can cross them off the list then. Obviously, Pistons, Wizards, Hornets, Raptors, Nets, Hawks, Bulls. Won't be talking about them. Don't need to come up in this conversation. Just throw that out.
No respect for the veteran presence that Tobias Harris is going to bring to the Detroit Pistons.
To your point, if the Sixers are fearing the Pistons, just cancel the season. Obviously,
cancel the franchise at that point, honestly.
Obviously, the Celtics, we don't really need to explain that one too much. We probably will.
No, I think we have to get deep into
But the 64-win team that just won the title, yes, you have a healthy amount of respect. And bring back their whole team, by the way. Yes, you have a healthy amount of respect.
Derek's trying to skip over one of the only teams that actually applies to this category. Oh, yeah. No. Just throw them out, too. Good podcasting work down there.
They might be the one team you would actually fear in a postseason. So I guess let's phrase it. Let's clarify. Are we talking about like fear in terms of they might pass the Sixers in the regular season standings, or fear when you get up to a playoff matchup?
I think both of them are important, right? Because I think if you're the Sixers, a lot of people still believe this is not how Daryl Morey and the franchise operates, but a lot of people still believe getting to the conference finals is a meaningful step, and that has to be accomplished this season. The Sixers are treating it as either we're winning the title or we're not, and it's sort of a binary thing. It doesn't matter if we lose in this round versus this round. So I think it matters who would you, if you're standing across from this team in the playoffs, who makes you feel a little bit unsettled? Who do you have some level of respect for? But also, regular season, who are you jostling with? Who do you think you're going to have to stave off potentially?
Yeah.
And maybe in a case like Milwaukee, who we've talked about a bit, but we'll get more into them today, maybe like for me, for example, I will fade them more than consensus just because of how I feel about Dame. But let's start with Boston, right? Like, they are the incumbent title winner. They won 64 games, as Derek already mentioned. They were an elite team on both sides of the ball. And most importantly, the thing that the Sixers never have, they have continuity. They are bringing back the entire spine and core of that title team. Their ownership group is paying everybody and then saying, arrivederci, we're walking out the door as soon as we get the highest bid possible we can get for this team. So they have all the short-term benefits of the chemistry, camaraderie, the high-end talent that they have.
Yep.
And ownership is basically washing their hands and saying, hey, enjoy that second apron. We won't be here to suffer the consequences from that. So if you were actually looking at who do you fear and thinking there's any bit of that inside the team, of course it's the Celtics. Because they were, last year, admittedly, everybody's got to deal with injuries and whatnot. They were way ahead of the pack. They were 14 wins ahead of the next closest team in the East last year.
Yeah, and winning 64 games, and look, I know that their path to the title wasn't necessarily the most difficult, but winning 64 games in a Eastern Conference, and quite frankly, just a league at large, it has a lot of parity right now.
Yeah.
There are fewer gimme games on a schedule than there typically are. That was a heck of an accomplishment. They will be incredible. And if you're going to talk about what you fear, I fear two things. I fear the Boston Celtics, because I think if you go into a playoff series, they would be the prohibitive favorites. And I fear injuries. I fear lower body injuries.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I fear about this upcoming season. That doesn't mean that Sixers don't have a chance.
And I think the second one is probably, if you were making a list of just generalized fears, that would be number one. That'd be ahead of any team.
Yep. Doesn't mean the Sixers wouldn't have a chance against Celtics, but it might be like 30%. Whereas I think maybe everyone we're talking about, just going into the regular season, you would give the Sixers probably a greater than 50% chance of winning that series. We can get into that. I'm sure we will. But they're the one team that I would actually classify as fear. The rest of them is sort of like you have a healthy amount of respect for a couple more of them.
And just going back to something you said at the very top, which is the regular season or the postseason. I think in the Celtics case, and I'll go back to 2023 when I was banging this drum big time because they just simply could not beat the Boston Celtics. Even if they lost the game by 1 or 2, they were close enough, but they did not win. And the reason why I was so big on them winning in the regular season was because it becomes a mental hurdle that you cannot beat a specific basketball team. Again, whether it's 1 or 2 points, you lost. And then when you get into the postseason last year and you're up 3-2 in the series, and it looks like you can win that game and finally advance to the Eastern Conference, you kind of turtle up a bit in that game overall because it was such a low-scoring game and the game was still hanging in the balance while you had arguably their best player having his struggles. He comes back, tears your heart out right at home, and then rips it out even more when he gets back for Game 7.
How many points to buy a score in that one?
Who was that?
How many points to buy a score in that one?
3 on 2 shots, I think it was, and he missed the first.
I'm just surprised you didn't bring it up because you bring it up every time we talk about that game.
Even though somebody,
Mr. Veteran Presence.
Even though Darkness already said Tobias Harris is jab stepping right now in Detroit. So, but for me, it's again how important the regular season is that then means something for the postseason, even if it's a false sense of hope for at least the fan base, because they just want to see them beat the Boston Celtics. They did it in those 3 games in the postseason, which were really, really important. And then they couldn't when it really, really mattered. So that's why the regular season against the Boston Celtics will certainly mean something for the fan base and probably even for me until we get there and see them in the postseason and win or lose.
For the player, so as you're bringing all this up, I think it's a good point because if you remember throughout the years, Joel himself has said it's not a rivalry. They always kick our ass, right? Like that has been vocalized by the franchise player.
And that was a couple years ago. There's been another ass kicking or two since then.
There's been a playoff. There's been a humiliating playoff defeat since then, right? So like that's something that as much as we'd like to sit here and say like season changes, new teams, new rosters, all that, the most important player, the biggest name guy on your team has verbalized that. And he's the guy that we've all said, look, he needs to be better in the playoffs, whether it's because of injuries, fatigue, roster around him, whatever. Joel needs to be better. And so the regular season matchup with Boston is super important for this team. I agree with you, Devon, because of that very fact, right? Like, you don't want to go into a potential playoff matchup with them having lost 3 out of 4 and having had 2 of those be not even close type of games. I don't want to see guys resting against Boston. I don't care. Rev it up for those games. That's what I want to see.
Nuggets.
You don't have to worry about the Nuggets thing because we've seen Joel against Jokic so many times.
Yes.
And that's a great example of Jokic is an incredible player, right? Like, we saw it in the Olympics. We see it every regular season. We've seen it in the playoffs, even against very good teams or tough matchups for him. Joel does not care. He stares that guy down, and he scores at will against him every single time.
But Paris is only like 170 feet above sea level.
Well,
what I'm saying
is
that's an example of the opposite, right? He's had so much success against him individually that if they, for example, were to get to the finals and they are playing Denver, yes, there would be the questions about, they're playing at altitude. Jokic is real. If they've gotten there, Jokic is clearly on a great run and playing very well. But I would have no reservations about how Joel feels or thinks going into that series. Whereas if you take that and apply the same logic to Boston, I don't know that that's the case. So I want to see them at least in a couple. If you split the season series, fine.
They have to be competitive.
You cannot lose the season series, and more importantly, you cannot lose it handily as they have at times in the past.
I will say, I'm going to look this up when we go to our next break, but I think they're pretty close to 500 against Celtics in the regular season over this run. So even if it's one thing, I agree with you that they can't go like 0-4 or 1-3, just because then you would have so much doom and gloom going into a series. But even if they go 3-1, everyone's going to be like, yeah, show me it in the playoffs in May.
Of course.
And just to sort of wrap up, or at least build off of the Celtics, first in offense last year, third in defense. They were the most complete team all around. They can have their games where they just don't shoot well because three-point identity is so big a part of who they are, but they're just a very good, very complete team where you really can't, they put no non-shooters on the floor and they put no bad defenders on the floor, and it's really, really tough to catch them off guard.
So when we talk about the fear part, let's just use that as, again, just a little bit of a talking point, because this may be the only team that there's some real fear there for how you look at what they do. The question then becomes, as the guys talked about, the rivalry that Joel says it's not. It's a rivalry. It just happens to be on the losing end of the Sixers side.
Let me give Joel a little bit of a break on this one. He's not just right within the recent context. It's not really a rivalry historically, because the Sixers have rarely beaten the Celtics ever. Not just since Joel's been here. It's, hey, the Sixers are really good, and they won a title while Boston won like 4 or 6 or however many in the same time period. When they've both been good at the same time, the Sixers have been in that elite tier, but Boston is just always in this other. And that's the most annoying part of the whole rivalry.
It is. I still look at it as a rivalry. It's just that
absolutely
the Celtics are way above in the rivalry where it's there. And that's where it'll bring back to the Joel part of him saying that because they don't beat them. All right, well, they don't beat them. Is it something that's fearful in them in certain parts of the game? And you never want to say a team or players are scared of anybody. And we've seen them beat them. They're close in a lot of these games where it's a competitive game. Something unravels with them in these games where we may not see it as much with the Celtics. And even if there is some unraveling with the Boston Celtics, they find a way to figure out where the 76ers do not against this specific team. Other teams, we've seen them correct the mistakes in the moment, figure it out, and they get it done. The Celtics, not so much. That's why the regular season is important for the matchup once they do get to the postseason. And again, eventually during those 4 games of the regular season, how do you walk away? How do you find ways to win these basketball games against the team that you're going to have to get over that hump with?
And Rick brings up in the chat, I agree with this. He said, I love how this Sixers roster matches up with them. It's certainly, they are much better positioned this year to take on this Celtics team. And I do think if you're looking for vulnerabilities with Boston, their thing is that they live by the sword, they die by the sword. So there will be games, even against elite teams, where you play a pretty good game. You defend them well. You have the right game plan coming in. but they just take 58 threes and make a ton of them. And the math problem is just so hard to overcome that you're not going to win. The flip side of that is there are games when they're going to play heavy isolation, spread it out, run everything through just Jason Tatum's going to attack this guy. Jaylen Brown's going to attack this guy. They will settle for tough pull-up jump shots. And Jason Tatum's going to put up a 3 for 15 start to the game, a 4 for 13 start to the game, and give you that opportunity to maybe win the game, at least get out to an early lead and build some padding between you and them. You have to be opportunistic and take advantage of those situations. So they're not invulnerable. They're not unbeatable, right? They're a team that has weaknesses at times in terms of their approach to the game. But the talent level is super high. And I think the other thing that, acquiring a guy like Drew Holiday helped, acquiring a guy like Derek White, and even Kristaps Porzingis, who I think adapted how he played to be one of the guys rather than a featured player, they all now have this understanding of, team before self and how things work. And, sometimes it's just Derek White's night. Sometimes it's Jaylen Brown won Finals MVP. The beginning of the season, people are like, how the hell in the world would you give Jaylen Brown this $300 million contract? And everyone's calling it untradeable and terrible. Well, he ends the season as the Finals MVP because in that series, he had it rolling, right? And so they're happy, all these guys, to just play through whoever has it rolling at any given time. Frankly, some of it helps that they're all paid really well so that none of these guys are fighting for next paycheck, right? They're locked up on long-term big money deals. They don't have to worry about the politics of, hey, this is my night. And so that's a big advantage that I think they have too. But again, not unbeatable. And when you put Joel Embiid against Kristaps Porzingis, that's a matchup that you could potentially attack. And that, we say it all the time, that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Joel being the best player in a series and leveraging whatever advantages that he has.
Yeah, and they're coming back from this. They're going to be defending champs. They're going to want to, again, prove that they are defending champs. You add in a few other things where Jaylen Brown is now ticked off at everybody because he didn't get.
And that'll be a fun subplot.
It'd be a nice little fun subplot.
Sure.
Jason Tatum is ticked off at Steve Kerr, so he wants to go on a mission and take it out on him, certainly, but the rest of the league because he didn't play in the Olympics. All these small little things that players use as things that they need to use a little bit to light a fire underneath them. That has nothing to do with anybody else, but for them, it's like, let's go show these people that we still are those guys.
Not only that, but they have to spend the first couple of months without Porzingis too. He's not expected to be back by the start of the season. So
a lot of Luke Cornett in the lineup, but they did bring him back. Wasn't he like the first signing on free agent day? That was the only one we had. Because we sat here
for like a half an hour. Really, that's all you're going to give us, Woj? Come on.
That was the other one. So when Kyle talks about all the money that the Boston Celtics have, good for them. I have a bank for them, and we'll tell you more about some of the other teams on the other side here on the PHLY Sixers podcast. With the Boston Celtics, I don't want to give them any advice, but I should because that's a lot of money that we're talking about. Or if we team up together to buy the franchise from the ownership and we buy the Boston Celtics and then just have it all unravel there for them.
It's going to take a lot of super chats.
And then fold the franchise.
There you go, fold the franchise. But we're having our money at TrueMark, and TrueMark is doing a great thing as well.
Michael B., where are you at?
TrueMark Financial Care Foundation is hosting a charity pickleball event to raise money for financial education in our local communities. And for those of you who were at the PHLY golf outing, you might remember our friends from TrueMark. This is to their benefit, again, for their foundation charity. We were not there because we were in Vegas, but Bree told us so much about it, how cool it was, the great things that they were doing. And, hey, we might want to be a part of that when the event is on September 7th at Upper Dublin Sports Center in Ambler, PA. It's from 1:30 to 5 p.m. So clear your schedule. September 7th, 1:30 to 5 p.m. It's a round robin, fun, non-competitive event, and I have a certified pickleball pro on site to overview the game for anyone who's never played before, raising my hand right now. You do not need prior experience, but I think I can hopefully pick it up pretty quickly. Paddles in the ball. The pickleballs will be there available to use for free. Cost to play is $50 to benefit the charity. All players get a swag bag from TrueMark and PHLY. And Bree told us about some really cool things that they gave up at the golf outing. So maybe you'll benefit from those. And if you want your company involved in a sponsorship and have your logo on display at the event, they're selling a variety of sponsorships from $200 to $1,000 as well. As far as the entertainment, even if you don't want to play, you can still support the event. Food, beer, trucks on site. Percentage of the proceeds will go to charity. There will be music, cornhole, and other lawn games, 50-50 raffles as well, and more fun prizes that will be there, plus giveaways. So we'll be there, hopefully, hanging out, live broadcasting from the event. Come spend Saturday with us playing pickleball. Best part, as a PHLY fan, you get a 10% discount on registration. Just register at truemark.com/PHLY pickleball. And if you want to put some, let's say, some numbers there and make some wages there on the pickleball event.
I don't know if we have pickleball wagers on Bet365, but everything else
has you covered. 90 million users worldwide. Some pickleball odds there on the site, but definitely for the NBA live stream, 780,000 events each year. 300 Bet365 pioneered live in-game betting. Again, Bet365 offers the widest range of games and markets available for live in-game betting across 78 sports. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Use the code PHLY365 to sign up, deposit $10, and claim your offer. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Your baseball team has won 2 in a row. The Bats got hot last night against Washington. Can they keep that going? And you feeling good about what they're doing? Go to Bet365 right now. Same game parlays allows you to combine the most popular markets from selected events across different sports into one big price parlay. Here's what you do. Download the Bet365 app like we have on our phones. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up and check out our boosts to see why. It's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Again, 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, I need to circle back on something from that pickleball tournament because it was just burning a hole in my brain. It said, and I get what they're saying. Mm-hmm. You said it's a round robin, a fun, non-competitive event. When I heard the words non-competitive event, I get like we want people of all types and skill levels and experience with pickleball, which you've said I've never played. And I completely get that part. Maybe I'm just a complete psycho. There is no such thing as a non-competitive game. If the best proof of that is the Pop-A-Shot machine in our office that Vince got for us as like hey, this is a fun thing to have in the office for everybody, but definitely our basketball guys. Yeah. And we have spent the last 2 weeks maniacally playing Pop-A-Shot, including Derek staying after hours last night and getting food so he could try to keep pushing for the high score on that machine. I reject the premise of a non-competitive event. I hope we get all sorts of people to come out to this pickleball tournament, but I won't be playing because if I was, I would be the guy absolutely losing my mind at every missed point possible.
Sure there are people who can play non-competitive pickleball.
Yes.
Kyle and I are not those people.
I am not that person in any way.
I can, but I will back off once I get frustrated because I cannot figure it out. That's my. I'll do it. And then I'm starting to get ticked off and I got to back away.
There's a South Park episode where they play, it's like a youth hockey team episode. And it's shot essentially like a cliche sports movie where it's, they overcome all these challenges and they get the opportunity to play. I don't remember if I think it's the Detroit Red Wings because I think the Colorado Avalanche, where they're from, are hurt or sick or they can't play. And they get this big motivational speech like, boys, you can do it. Go out there, you can overcome. And the Detroit Red Wings beat them like 75-0. And all the kids are like limbs hanging all over the place. They're getting plastered into the boards. That would be me playing pickleball against people who didn't try.
I'm pretty good. Like if you put me on like a pickleball team where the other players just suck, I'm okay with that. I'm okay losing because everyone's just out there having fun.
Yeah.
I just cannot take my own mistakes and my own shortcomings.
That's a good way of putting it.
All right. Well, mistakes and shortcomings against the Boston Celtics. We talked about that in the first segment. We have to go to the other team that everyone talks about. Paolo Banchero mentioned them of the three, including the Sixers, the New York Knicks, and where they are. And a lot of people feel certain ways about them. They feel differently. Knicks fans are very, very excited, and they should be because of what they did last season, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, adding Kale, bringing back OG Anunoby, a healthy Julius Randle coming back. They're very curious to see what they can do with him now. Their depth is really good. One problem for me, Kyle, is Isaiah Hartenstein is now gone. He was a big piece, whether he was coming off the bench behind Mitchell Robinson early in the season or when he eventually took over and became a big, huge part of what they did, which is why he got the big contract from OKC. That's a big loss for them. That said, they will be in the mix of the teams we talk about in that top three.
Yeah, so look, their downside case is, one, everything's going to run through Jalen Brunson, and he's a short guard, and sometimes you will just run into a wall with that. Yep. I mean, early in the Sixers series, they did a very good job holding him down early in that series, and if they had been able to keep him not at that level, right, because he was mightily struggling, but if you keep him at like a medium Jalen Brunson performance, I think they're vulnerable. I don't think they have I love McHale, but I think if he has to be the guy for a lot of that series, I would be skeptical that they can beat a team like the Sixers, a team like the Celtics at that level. Yeah. Like, I think they can certainly beat anybody they're likely to match up with in round one, but I think the deeper you get, the more I'd be concerned about the secondary creation.
Well, and that's why throwing away those first two games when he was struggling were so frustrating. If you had a team who took advantage of those, New York might not advance in that series.
I would say the other one, though, that is more meaningful for me, as you brought up, the Hartenstein loss is big because he is a multi-skilled big, right? I think Mitchell Robinson is good. I think in the Sixers matchup, he has shown he's so big that he can give Joel some problems in isolation and defend him one-on-one. That's a big thing. Where do you go beyond that, right? Like Precious Achiuwa, I've never really been a believer in. If he had been a minimum type guy here, I would have, thrown a parade, obviously. But as a big rotation guy, not a big fan of. Some of their team concept relies on, I shouldn't say some, a lot of their team concept relies on a clean bill of health for the wings. And while your cousin is one of the biggest Iron Men in the league, OG Anunoby gets hurt every single year in some capacity. It misses time, whether that's in the regular season and the playoffs. And so if they can't play that multiple big wing lineup in the playoffs to make up for it, whether you're playing truly small and saying, hey, OG's a 5 essentially, and then we run out everybody else, or you have Precious at the 5 and you have Kale and you have OG. If OG's hurt and you can't do that, I think it gets a lot dicier for them in a real hurry. You're playing guys like DiVincenzo is okay defensively, right? But he's somebody that can be exploited. Certainly Brunson can. And if you run out of these options where you don't have a big back there to rebound and protect the rim, and you're not as stout as you want to be defensively on an individual matchup level, I think that they could get in some trouble quickly. But if they're healthy, it might not matter.
So I think where I would place them in terms of regular season performance, I think they're pretty comfortably a pretty safe team. Like in terms of teams who might finish in the top 3 in the East, outside of the injury, which a lot of teams at the top have injury concerns, especially the team we'll probably get to next. Outside of that, I think they have a really good chance of being a top 3 team in a regular season in the Eastern Conference. Could they finish ahead of the Sixers? I think it would probably take a pretty substantial injury to Joel Embiid, but Joel Embiid has had pretty substantial injuries throughout his career. Where I wonder is, do they have this, outside of Boston and the Sixers, do they have the most championship equity of the teams left? And I do wonder a little bit about Julius Randle's fit. I'm not sure it's really going to matter because quite frankly, I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to be traded between now and the playoffs.
But there's still, if we focus on the regular season and how we get there and how the seeding shakes out, I do think the Randle factor is significant.
A factor for sure, but he's been awful in his 2 playoff runs. Like truly, truly awful. And he comes out there and he's like, I want the ball. I want my shots. I want to create for the team. And he has another clunker of a playoff run that could really impact them. And like you mentioned, Brunson, against the right matchup, might have a game or two where he struggles. And against a good team that take advantage of that could, it's one thing to beat the Sixers when Embiid's at 50%. It's another thing to beat 4 teams throughout a playoff run if someone like that might struggle against certain matchups. But really, it's also just like I think they're lacking a number 2 a little bit. And when you add all of those factors in, I think they're a really good team. I think if they're healthy, they could win mid-50s games or low to mid-50s at the very least. But I do wonder if other teams, and probably specifically the Bucks, and I think we're going to fade the Bucks here in a minute, and I would say they have a lower probability of being a championship caliber team. But I think if everything goes right, they might have more championship equity. But it would take a number of things to go perfectly right for them.
Yeah, and Winona says Randall is not going to mix well with that. We kind of agree. That was the one thing when we looked at it when the trade went down with Kale and then bringing back Anunoby. All right, where's he going to go? How's he going to fit? And that completely changed as the course of the offseason continued to go on, especially when Hartenstein went to Oklahoma City. That changed. So the discussion now is, well, I think all of us are curious to see how that plays out. Brunson is going to be a starter. Kale's going to be a starter. Anunoby. So is Randall, and the same for Mitchell Robinson. So Hart, McBride, DiVincenzo, those are your first 3 to come off the bench, and you mix in Achua or Jericho Sims if they go a little bit deeper in the bench there. Other than that, look, they have the depth. But now the big question is Julius Randle as that number 2 that Derek brings up. Can he stay healthy? How much is he going to fit there? As far as Jalen Brunson has cemented himself as the guy in New York now. He's already been named the captain. All that great buzz that was there for Julius Randle 2 years ago when he first made his All-Star team and New York was buzzing about him. That's gone because that's
Brunson's the mayor now.
Exactly. He is the mayor, and that is him. That's all him. So is Julius Randle going to be okay with that? Because that was one of the big things when he was getting all that praise for his first All-Star appearance. The whispers were he still felt like he wasn't being respected enough. Well, guess what? Now that's really gone. And then you bring in Anunoby, you bring Kale in, and they make that run without you. People think you're expendable. So is he going to overdo it and trying to force himself? That's his game anyway.
He also wants to use some of those floor spots that Brunson is very good from, right?
Yes.
And so obviously he's had good runs as a shooter, but he still wants to get to that mid-post area and do Julius Randle things from those spots. And so, how does that clash? And then how do the other guys fit around it? Like Mikal is an easy guy to, he'll slide in wherever he needs to get to. But now also, this is not criticism of your cousin, but now that your cousin has been a first option somewhere, right, and succeeded at a pretty high level being that way, he wants to get the ball. I'm sure.
And guess what? He likes to get to his spot.
All these guys are good players.
Kale likes to get to his spot in the mid post. Pull up jumper, free throw extended. He gets to that fadeaway every time. That's what he works on. That's what he does. And as a number 1, he really got a chance to show that with the Brooklyn Nets. He's still going to want to be able to take some of those shots within the flow of the offense.
And so as all these guys are going to have to figure out, where am I in this ecosystem? How can I get to my stuff? And Tibbs, for his strengths as a defensive guy, he's always been an elite defensive guy. Has not necessarily been renowned for how he sets up his offenses, right? Like it was a lot of just, hey, Jalen, go do stuff last year, right? And so let's see how that plays out. And if we bring it back to the Sixers perspective, I think the big positive, if you're the Sixers and you're looking at the Knicks, is, hey, we might have to see them in round 2. We might have to beat them out for a 2 seed, for example.
Yep.
You've already seen in a playoff setting, Joel compromised with a better front court for the Knicks, average 33 a game, drop 50 on them, and still have a pretty good series. You've seen Tyrese Maxey go into the Garden in a winner-go-home scenario and put on an absolute masterpiece. So unlike the Celtics, there is not that history of, oh, man, we always lose to the Knicks. Oh, man, I'm really scared of going to Madison Square Garden. So that part, I think the Sixers would feel much better about. It's not to say they're absolutely going to outlast the Knicks or beat the Knicks this season if they meet them in the playoffs. But I do think they would feel much better going into that series than if you end up like the 4 seed, for example, and you got to play Boston in round 2.
Yeah.
That is a way bigger hurdle to clear than playing the Knicks as it stands right now.
Would definitely prefer to play them in that second round. Definitely. And I think most people would feel good going into that series of whether they feel like it's a 60-40 chance or even if it's a 53-47 and you're just looking at it saying, I think we have a chance to beat this basketball team. You know it's going to be a competitive series either way. Seeing them in round 2 is much better than seeing the Boston Celtics in round number 2 for the Philadelphia 76ers. But they do match up well against them. Their style of play is also going to be tough for the Sixers because of what they do. We saw it a season ago, and defensively they really get in. But I just look, I root for 25 all the time, and I'm always going to do that for him to have success. And if he gets there,
not those stinky blue and orange colors, buddy.
If he gets to a certain point, of course, of the postseason, I'm always going to want him to get a championship. The Isaiah Hartenstein piece really, really bothers me. So Tibbs is a great coach, though. We've seen that many times over with the Chicago Bulls, helping turn around that Minnesota Timberwolves situation, and now where the Knicks are. We know how good he is. So him figuring that part out and bringing all these pieces together and making it work where people are not upset. Contracts are going to be up soon for Jalen did his part. Randall was eligible for an extension. Kel's going to be eligible for an extension. Josh Hart is going to be eligible again for an extension.
And his role will diminish some this year
change
because of Mikal coming on, because of Randall presumably being healthy and at least there for the first half of the season.
Some of those closing lineups are going to be different and what they look like. People are going to be upset sitting on the bench, and that's going to be an interesting part. But I think the Sixers are just above the Knicks when we look at the standings right now for that top 3.
I'm sure Mikal's a great guy. His father's been on the show. There is no chance in hell I will ever root for the Knicks to win a championship. I just can't do it. Their fans are too annoying. It's not going to happen. I wish you the best, but no, I won't do it.
I won't root again. It's not me rooting. So this is the tough part. I don't want to get into this.
You're rooting for your cousin.
I'm rooting for him. So if he wins, he wins.
I just can't join you. I can't. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not going to be on the float or anything. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that.
I would feel good for you and for Mikal, and that's about it.
And I would also hate my life.
Yeah, because the other guys are really cool and all that stuff. But nah, man. you wear the orange and the blue. Legendary uniforms, all that great stuff. I talk to these guys all the time. Now I'm a nerd about the uniforms.
They got to work on their elevator situation for the media. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that is tough. Haven't been there before, but yeah, man. I mean, look, it's what it is. It's not. Yeah, it's what it is. All right.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. We'll get there when we get there when the Knicks. But I do think the Sixers are just above them.
It's honestly more about the fans than it is about the rivalry or the city. Like, their fans are just freaking annoying.
They are rough, man. They are definitely rough. All right, we got to get to a few of these other teams and start running through them in the Eastern Conference. So when we come back, we'll tell you about the Milwaukee Bucks. You talked about them. We'll get there. We'll get to Cleveland, Orlando again, and maybe a few others that people are not talking about that they maybe should, right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
Yeah, listen, guys, the only other thing we want to tell you about today, tell you about it all the time, our Die Hard program and all the wonderful events and things that come with that. So we have an upcoming event at the Top Tomato for our Phillies crew, the PHLY Phillies show. You can watch the Phillies take on the Braves August 29th. It seems like the fan base is now in good spirits after a nice drubbing last night, right? Yeah, the vibes were bad for the
Hey man,
your vibes are never good.
Got the cycle, baby.
I don't want to.
I worry about everything in that team. Go on.
Anyway, at the Top Tomato, look, we're going to restore the vibes here. Dollar beers, dollar hot dogs at the Top Tomato, August 29th, Phillies Braves. We will have a Phillies ticket giveaway, merch and memorabilia giveaway. You must RSVP for free to be eligible for giveaways at allphly.com/events, and then be on the lookout for other events. Obviously, Devon was just talking about that pickleball event that we had. It'll be a nice charity event that's coming up out in the suburbs, close to where I grew up. Also, the Die Hard program, you get access to content that's behind the paywall, premium written content. You get 20% off of events when we have the paid events. We'll be having tailgates and watch parties and all sorts of things through the year. We also have our members only Discord that is attached to the Die Hard program that I'm not going to say who. One of the members of this team is not as involved in as us, but on top of discussing,
is this still installed on your
the
phone?
Sixers, Eagles, Phillies, Flyers,
I might sneak in
we
there.
get into, we share things from behind the scenes in the office, like our Papa Shot battles and content and pictures and videos of Derek really sweating it out in the office late at night trying to
like a Celtics
run up the
Sixers
score.
rivalry. It's all
we talk
one-sided.
about movies, music, video games, all kinds of other stuff that you guys, our other fans, readers, friends, family want to discuss in the Discord. It's become one of the most important parts of this company to me in terms of being able to interact with you guys at all times in an easy fashion. So that only comes with a diehard membership. So go to allphly.com, check out our diehard program. You'll get great written content. Right now, ZB, Zach Berman, covering the Eagles, was up in New England covering the preseason. He's got great stuff. Charlie is a machine on the Flyers. You got Derek and I on the Sixers, Jim Salisbury and John covering the Phillies. All kinds of great stuff. So go to allphly.com. Check that out.
All right. Now we got to start check out some of these other teams in the Eastern Conference.
Do we want to go Orlando next since Paolo is trying to put the Magic there? And he's kind of the catalyst for the conversation.
Let's go Orlando. We'll get to the Bucks after Orlando. How do you feel about the Orlando Magic? I shared my thoughts yesterday of how I'm very interested in what they look like. Coming back, Paolo has not taken a dip. He's from year 1 to year 2, he's an all-star. And Franz took a step back. A little bit surprising. Jalen Suggs, though, elevated his play where he's established as a good player again this year, maybe a focal point for them. So where do you see the Orlando Magic and this new up-and-coming team that they are?
So I think to Paolo's point, I think adding KCP makes them a better version of what they already are. And so if you think that translates to a couple more wins in the regular season, they won 47 games last year. Milwaukee was the 3rd seed with 49 wins. So if you think KCP is worth a couple of wins and the win totals will stay relatively flat year on year, they could get into that 3 or 4 seed mix. My concern for them is I don't think KCP changes what their actual problems are, which is like genuine shot creation. I think the ability for Paolo to go and get his own obviously will get better and better over time. I think Franz is somebody who can he playmakes well for someone at his size.
Yes.
But Jalen Suggs is not like that, floor general point guard. Right now, he's someone who makes most of his money on defense and has expanded his range now out the 3-point range and is able to be like a catch and shoot option. I worry when push comes to shove, they don't have that ball handling guard type player that can consistently create looks for other people. And so you get to a place where it's going to be a lot of like, hey, Paolo, go bail us out and make a bunch of shots. And if he's able to do it, then great, because he's a very talented young player. I just don't think they have the connective passing and the playmaking that a team needs to win at a high level in the playoffs. Maybe the Sixers don't either, right? Like one of my concerns that I've voiced over and over again is the playmaking stuff. I just think they have a diversity in offensive talent that the Magic don't. Flip side of that is they can be a very, very, very good defensive team.
Yeah.
Like they have big athletes all over the place. And, if Jonathan Isaac ever stays healthy, then he can certainly help them with that too. But that's his big problem. So I have a healthy amount of respect for Orlando. I think they are a very good young team. I'm just not really a believer in their ceiling. So they're an example. Derek was trying to split hairs or asking if we should split hairs at the beginning of the podcast. They're a team I would fear from you might win a lot of regular season games perspective, and you might push the Sixers at the end of the regular season to, hey, we got to really gun for that 2 or that 3 seed because of them. Once it gets to the playoffs, I don't have much trepidation about playing Orlando.
Here's the thing, too. Orlando was in that top 4 for a long time in the middle of the season. So is KCP enough to help them overcome a slide like that? I don't know, because it may be shot making. I didn't watch enough of their games to answer that question, really. Could be the shot making, could be the lack of shot creation that you talked about, could be the struggles of Franz Wagner from beyond the 3-point line that we saw the years before, where it didn't fall for them last year, but maybe they fall this season having another veteran player out there on the floor. Money Mars says that Tristan Da Silva is going to be the rookie of the year. Could he come in and as an older player?
Another example of he doesn't change any. He's another one of those guys, big forward, and he can shoot, but he can't dribble basically at all.
And he's also in a weird spot because he's an older rookie, so you expect he can contribute early. But he's also like there's a lot of depth in where he plays. Like I'm not sure he's going to get the minutes to really go out there and put up a rookie of the year campaign. So it's a weird fit. You know, the last time they were
go to Bet365 though, by the way, and put your rookie of the year best if that's what you want to do.
Do you know when the last time they were an above average offense?
Last time?
When Dwight was there?
You have to go back to Dwight in 2012. It's been a long time. A lot of times it's not even close. The last 8 years.
Now, I don't put that. I mean, there's a lot of like Vooch, Evan Fournier seasons in there, right?
But like you're talking about 8 straight years where they've been a bottom 10 offense. Last year, you thought, all right, maybe some of these young players stepping up, they'll finally be able to get to some base level of competency where they can truly make a run. And they didn't. They ended up 22nd in the league in offense. They got that 47 wins largely because they had the second best defense in the league. Now you expect some of the young players to take a step and some of the growth. Like, they'll be a better offensive team because of KCP. They'll be a better offensive team because some of their young kids will grow. But I think Kyle's point about ball handling and connected passing is very true. And when you're talking about a team and whether or not you fear them in the playoffs, I just don't think they're going to be able to execute in the half court enough to really scare a good team like the Sixers. It's one thing to win a first round series. It's another thing to beat a title contender. And look, they might make a midseason trade that changes all of this.
Yes.
And the way we talk about it. Maybe Suggs makes another jump, although
that's where I was going to go.
Even when he makes a jump, I don't think he's like a real creative playmaker. It's just his shot has gotten so markedly better that it's easier to play him on offense. I think they will be better. I think this could be the year that they're finally not a bottom 10 offense. They could end up being around 15th. But I don't think they're going to be scary enough that, going back to the title of the show, I would truly be
I'm a big Suggs guy. I like what he did at Gonzaga with the shot creation. As you talk, the defensive stuff, that's always been there. Former football player, all that stuff. And it shows on the floor for him getting that recognition as well for the all NBA defensive team. But if that is that jump that they believe that he can make, and letting someone like Markelle Fultz go, who was a one guy coming off the bench who could shot create, then maybe they do feel like he is one that could take that step. And then, again, Franz doing his part, Paolo doing his thing. You just the question marks of any others. Gary Harris is not, even though they brought him back, he's not a shot creator at this stage of his career. And the same for Jonathan Isaac. I mean, anybody else that they have coming off the bench, that's just not who they are. They're the 3 guys that will shot create. And it's a big drop from Paolo at the position that you mentioned to Franz and Suggs, where you want Suggs certainly be a lot higher in that order of shot creation.
I don't think they have one above average passer for their position. Maybe Paolo, just because you don't expect all that much. But he's
Franz.
not.
I think Franz, just based on the size.
And we've seen it. It hasn't been consistent enough, but we've at least seen it.
No, you can talk me into Franz for his position, which I think is a key. But when you combine that with Suggs and Harris on the perimeter, and even KCP, who's not really a creator, there's just so little on the perimeter that having an above average but not elite, big man be your focal point. It's tough to make that work.
Yeah.
And I think they have a lot of offensive pieces that I probably like more individually than I like how they fit around each other. And I just, like I said, a lot can happen. A lot of these players are 21, 22, especially their key ones. But it would take a pretty massive leap for me to actually be fearful of them.
And look, we've seen it with the Sixers, but this is true across the league, has been for a long time. You can be an elite half-court defense, right? But when you get to the playoffs, if you can't consistently score, you're not going to be in half-court defense all the time. And so then the strength of your team gets neutralized because you're not able to actually set up and take advantage of the talent that you do have. So good teams will punish you in transition on your missed shots in the playoffs. And that we saw it in the Cleveland series, right? There were a few games that were just like they could not score, and Cleveland was able to run it up for stretches. And Cleveland was not a dominant offensive team, right? They're a team that can get hot, certainly. Donovan Mitchell had some amazing games in that series, but they're playing 2 bigs, and Evan Mobley's supposed to be the stretch big of that pairing.
Yeah.
He still hasn't become a guy who can routinely shoot. So if that's a team that's able to score on you in a playoff series enough to beat you, that doesn't speak highly of your ability to go out and beat, the Knicks, the Sixers, or certainly the Celtics.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned Cleveland. We might as well just jump to Cleveland. Bucks keep getting passed over, man. We're just passing right over the Bucks. See them opening night. Cleveland Cavaliers bringing back Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. All those trade talks is a possibility. No. And they re-signed Evan Mobley, give Jared Allen also an extension. He's not going anywhere. What do you think of the Cleveland Cavaliers as we talk about, again, teams that you have to respect in the East?
Not a believer.
Okay.
I think they're maybe one trade, maybe multiple big trades away from being where they need to be. I just think there's too much overlap with their top four guys, right? I don't think Garland and Mitchell work as well as they need to because both of them want and need the ball to some degree. And as I just mentioned with the Mobley component, I'm still relatively high on Evan Mobley, but at what point is he going to be a consistent offensive player, floor spacer in order to make that work? Because Jared Allen is a non-shooter. That ship has sailed. He's been in the league long enough that we could say. And Mobley did shoot, I think he was 36, 37% from three last year. He's only taken one a game. Yeah. So that doesn't really mean anything to me. I think in a playoff series, teams would mostly leave him alone and he wouldn't shoot the ball. And so I don't know what the plan is there if he doesn't become a higher volume, true power forward, right? Because I think you can see defensively why it works. He's super mobile, super switchable. Allen is a very good starting center level player. That can work. I just don't know how, other than Donovan Mitchell just going bonkers in every playoff series, where he goes nuclear in every series. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't think you can count on him to do that over and over and over again for an entire playoff run. So I think they need to move one of those four guys. It's not going to be Mitchell. It's likely not going to be Mobley. And didn't they just give Allen a new Garland, I think the writing is on the wall for, but who do you turn him into?
Yep.
That's kind of the big question.
No, I
like Garland.
Yeah, I like Garland too. I think he's been in a tough spot, and I don't think he gotten the best of him. But I like him as well. But I do agree he's probably one you have to move. Probably won't spend too much time on this because we can't finish this pod without talking about the Bucks, in part because I think we can really get Kyle worked up on this one. So I will just mostly reiterate what Kyle says. It's a little tough to measure them last year because so many players missed so much time, especially Mitchell. They were a completely different team when he left and also when he came back. And it looked like everyone was just sort of off. But it did seem like earlier in the season, they were better when they had some injuries and everyone's roles kind of got simplified and they knew what they were supposed to do and they knew where their spots on the floor. I think they need to be reshuffled. They're a little bit like the Magic, where if they do have a lot of success, it's largely based off of that defense. I think they're a top-ranked defense in the league a couple of years ago. And offense, I just don't think they have enough.
All right.
Despite the fact they have an incredible offensive player in Mitchell.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the Bucks and give them some time so you can get Kyle going.
You're not going to get me going. I think Dame, if he's not 3 years ago, Dame, I don't see how the team concept works. It just what is the upside case for them if Dame isn't back to being first team All NBA competitor Dame Lillard? There isn't one. They're not. The team used to work because even though Giannis had limitations as a half-court player, they were so good on both ends that if the half-court offense went awry, well, okay, we're still a great defensive team. Okay, we had a bad defensive game. Drew, for whatever reason, is getting cooked by Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, whoever it might be. Okay, the other end, we can go down and we still feel good about our ability to score. Well, now you have to win through offense. They just do not. They've gotten older, right? Some of their, Brook Lopez is older. Giannis, frankly, the other part of it, I'm not saying that he's injury prone, but he has now suffered injuries in multiple playoff series. Big part of the reason they've gone out early in recent seasons. And a guy who plays that hyper physical style that relies predominantly on physical dominance and athleticism, if you lose, let's say 10% of that, the margins begin to shrink more and more, and that hurts you in transition, that hurts you in the half court. So I'm worried about that to some extent, but it's more so I don't see what their outs are if they're not Boston level last year offense, and they just weren't that. The Giannis Dame fit was a lot clunkier than I think people expected, because everyone assumed, hey, they're just going to run Dame Giannis pick and roll to death, and it turns out you have to actually have both guys wanting to do that all game, and it was not clear that was the case. So I'm a skeptic of the Bucks. I was a skeptic of the Bucks from the moment they made the trade, and until I see them defend credibly for more than like 2 games in a row at a time, I'm going to stay on this island.
They were 19th defensively, and that was with 79 games from Brook Lopez, who will be 37 years old by the time the playoffs start next year. I think everyone expects that, they're going to have a preseason where Doc can work with them. They should be better defensively. There's a chance they could be worse defensively. If some of these players, Lopez, Middleton, continue to show signs of aging or miss significant time, they could definitely take a step back. I sort of agree with Kyle. Is there some upside? Yeah, look, if Dame finds a fountain of youth, he had a couple of years ago where he had that ab injury.
They got Pasechniks on a two-way, baby.
Pasechniks on a two-way. You still have an MVP candidate. There is a pathway. It's just there's like 6 or 7 things that have to go right, and it's hard for me to see that happening. But what do you think the odds are that at some point in the next 2 years, Doc will be like, I told them not to make the Drew trade. Like, I feel like there's a chance. I advise them not to do that. There's a non-zero chance that will eventually happen.
He was definitely
not while he's a coach.
No, he was advising Adrian Griffin at that point.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure exactly when he started advising, but he was definitely involved.
Yeah, he was definitely involved.
It'll happen. I'm telling you, I'm calling it. I'm calling my shot.
Listen, it would not shock me whatsoever to hear some kind of crazy claim.
Not while he's a coach, but sometime.
Now, they did add a player or two I liked in the offseason, right? Like DeLon Wright as a depth piece. I do like him. I kind of like Taurean Prince, but if you're relying on him to be like a big minute guy, I don't think that's the right spot for him. I think if he's like your 8th man, maybe. But they're in a situation where Doc is going to have to play one of these young guys, right? Like he's going to have to lean heavily on Beauchamp. He's going to have to lean heavily on Andre Jackson. I'm blanking on who's the kid they drafted out of Australia. AJ Johnson. He had some real moments at Summer League, and I know that there was some buzz from scouts about him in the pre-draft process. There were people who were like, they way overdrafted him, blah, blah, blah. But do you think Doc is going to play AJ Johnson minutes this year at 20 years old coming out of Australia? Like, I don't buy it. So even their upside case relies on probably having a different head coach than they have right now.
They also brought in Gary Trent late for that shooting guard position.
So that he's helpful, but he is not helping the defensive problem.
Yeah, all right. I mean, he fills the Grayson Allen role, maybe, but maybe not, because we've seen him shoot his way out of things also. Do we want to get into, just bring it up, people are not talking about the Miami Heat. That's the thing. They're not really just talking about them.
They're always everybody has some form of fear of the Miami Heat, right?
So it's not based on any kind of logic. It's just based on PTSD.
Well, it's logical in the sense that they always just pull something out of their rear end.
50% of the time pull something out of their rear end. The other year, they're really bad.
It's the every other year, right? So last year, they were a play-in team. They lose to Boston in round 1, and it was just like, whatever. Who cares about the Heat? They are due for one of their voodoo magic playoff runs to the NBA Finals. So it's logically or illogically logical.
Logically, they are not a title contender.
No. All right, because they got worse, right? Yeah. They're not as good of a team this year. They're getting older.
They lost Caleb Martin.
Caleb Martin is gone. That's now they'll probably turn some guy off the street into a starter level
Hayward
player.
High School takes that next jump. There you go.
There is another team we haven't talked about that we might have to wait a moment here to get into.
We are shortchanging
the bottom of the
Yeah, absolutely. And we also, everybody's been great in the chat, and we appreciate everybody jumping in here in the chat with us, talking about so many things. I see a lot of people just laughing in there, saying the chat is on fire today. So we appreciate
some interesting sidebars going on.
Interesting sidebars in there. We have a super chat that we're going to get to from Real Time with Prince Blue, who says, how many games will Morey stay with no true power forward for the season? Well, before the guys answer, and just looking at this, it's one that even if they bring in somebody now or late, right before training camp, it's probably not going to be someone that's going to take one of those starting spots. As we've talked about Marcus Morris and Jay Crowder and some of these other names, they're not going to do that just yet. But before I get the guys' thoughts on everything about that and get all of your thoughts out there as well, we want to say we appreciate everybody viewing here today. And also want to remind everybody to make sure to go sign up for the Die Hard program, as Kyle and Derek mentioned a little bit earlier. Phillies top tomato for the Braves on August 29th, $1 beers and $1 hot dogs. And also, once again, the Birds. The Birds are getting ready for something fun.
Birds are back,
as a watch party for the Brazil game on a Friday night. Friday night football. Yeah. Friday night football is amazing.
Friday night lights, man.
On September 6th from Brazil, Green Bay, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So make sure you go to allphly.com, look under the events calendar for more of the upcoming events, including the pickleball tournament that we shared with you a little bit earlier. But the Miami Heat, all of that, some of those are going to be tough power forward oppositions when we look at some of these teams. So how long will Daryl Morey go without a true power forward?
So here's what I'll say. I don't think Daryl Morey is concerned about not having a true power forward.
I agree.
I think Daryl Morey is pretty concerned about the rebounding. So if he feels like the best way to address that is a backup power forward, that might be the 14th roster spot. If he feels in season that he needs to make a trade and the best player who can rebound and help out in other areas is power forward, then he might make that trade. But it's also like a 6'6" wing guy who can help with the rebounding. That might be the solution as well. So I just don't think that necessarily the power forward per se, having like a 6'8" to 6'10" size defender is necessarily his priority. I think rebounding is.
Yeah, so here's how I agree with Derek on all fronts here. Here's how I would say it. I don't think if the Sixers sign Marcus Morris, it's because his position is technically power forward. It's because he's brings a skill
because
more
he
likely
out at the
shooting
Classic
than
and
anything else, right? Their hope would be that you get enough rebounding using the athleticism that is on hand, which is a much bigger upgrade than on where it has been in seasons past, certainly over last season. But yeah, I don't think they're blind to the fact that they don't have good rebounders on this roster. Yeah. And I think if they could pull a guy out of free agency that was an elite rebounder and was at least like a respectable three-point shooter to space the floor, they would go and sign that guy right now. Unfortunately, on August 16th, after most moves have been made, there are not many guys who are very good at any one skill, let alone the one thing that they specifically need right now. So it is going to be a waiting game, and it might be something that gets addressed around the trade deadline.
And look, here's what I'll say about the power forwards. People whose arms are closer to the basket tend to be better at rebounding. Not always, as we saw last year with Mo Bamba, but frequently, if you are tall, you tend to be better at rebounding. And they're probably not going to go out and try to get too many more centers because you can only play one of them at a time. So I think there's a chance they end up pursuing, like I said, either with the 14th roster spot or in an in-season trade, a power forward. But if it is a plus rebounder at a different position, I think they would be happy with that as well.
Any teams in the Eastern Conference that you want to just give a hat tip to and say, hey, we see you? Indiana?
Well, I was going to say, the one we haven't talked about is Indiana. And I think the reason I would bump them over a couple of these teams in terms of quote-unquote fear factor, simply because they play in a way that gets you discombobulated, right? It's very different going into a game against Indiana than it is Milwaukee or Cleveland or Orlando. And we saw it at times even against the Sixers last year. Granted, it was a bad schedule matchup based on how the schedule unfolded. But there are times where they'll just run. And when you're a team built around Joel Embiid and to a lesser extent Paul George, who don't want to run, they want to play a slow half-court game, they will hurt you and they will run. And Tyrese Halliburton, despite being the mascot for Team USA and sitting on the bench most of that Olympic run, is a high-level offensive player, a guy who can set other people up. I don't really believe in him as you're the guy, you have to go score, all that kind of stuff. But he had some big moments in last year's playoffs, and they will hit you with 48 minutes of not just pace, but floor spacing. And so if you're Joel Embiid, as much as he's handed Miles Turner his butt over the years, he's got to close out to the three-point line constantly, and he's doing a lot of rim to line, rim to line, rim to line, and that adds up miles, that adds up fatigue. And so I have a healthy amount of respect for the Indiana Pacers. I would still pick Philadelphia to beat them in a series, but they're a team that it is unique enough that I think that you have to at least be aware of them and kind of factor them into.
They won the
broader
season
playoff
series
stuff.
against the Sixers last season, so they're the way that they play up and down.
And Boots pointed out they're getting Mathurin back,
Yep.
which I'm not like I don't think he's like an all-star or anything, but that's another shot creator that was one of their problems once they got into the playoffs in some of those games before the New York Knicks completely fell apart due to injuries. They didn't have other shot creators. And so if Mathurin is back and healthy, that's another variable that is worth factoring in.
Jeff Stewart says the Pacers are a bad matchup, not more talented. And
the thing is, I would also think if you're a Pacers fan, you probably think the Sixers are a bad matchup because they have nobody to stop Joel Embiid. He's had a lot of success against Turner. They're a really bad defensive team overall. Tyrese Maxey should be able to shred him.
Paul George isn't afraid of that arena. I'll tell you that.
So I think both teams, because you're right, both teams stylistically do what the other team can't stop. And the transition is scary because if you want to neutralize Joel Embiid as a defender, well, start 20% of your possessions or 25% of your possessions where he won't even be a factor. But I think they would also be equally concerned.
All right, so more than a hat tip to Indiana. We respect them. They just got pushed to the very end. Any hat tips to anybody else? We mentioned Miami, Indiana. Everyone else is
kind of
just
stinks.
Yeah, we'd have to go to the Western Conference, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, we appreciate. You know what, Bree? Can we give these guys one on the way out of the game that Bree has put together? See, Bree has done this, but we communicate about it. We leave these two guys out to throw this. It's not a trivia question today. It's something else that Bree has worked on. And we wanted to do it.
Should I go all NBA or Sixers?
Go Sixers first. Okay. And we wanted to do this. Derek's off next week for a couple of days. So we wanted to do this while Derek was here. So we didn't start it next week and
Slacker.
say, why is Derek not here?
Derek
Why
leaves
didn't
when
you wait
times
until
get
I
tough.
came back to do this game?
I will say I'm going on a camping trip. I will be mostly off grid. I will make sure that
make sure you bring that Rugged Road cooler, by the way.
I will make sure I tune into the show every day though, just to see whether or not Kyle has another hit 'em up diss track in his arsenal like he did yesterday.
All right, Bree, go for the first one and explain what we're doing here, if you don't mind. Once you have it ready to go, this is a fun one. I haven't seen them. I just know about exactly what it is.
Oh, it's a silhouette. I think I know who that is.
Name the Philadelphia.
Can I guess?
76ers.
Yeah, go for
Are we getting any clues?
No.
It looks like Kyle Lowry to me.
Yeah, that's it.
There you go. Right off the bat.
Bang!
Right off the bat. Did you know that?
No, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, I would have guessed Kyle Lowry.
Do you want
Honestly,
one
I
more?
thought a little TJ.
One more on the way out for Bree, and then we'll get to our roll call. Kyle Lowry, the first one there on the silhouette.
See, this is what I meant when I said non-competitive doesn't exist. The second I knew it, I was like, let's go.
All right, so we got a lefty. Push
This is
shot.
all NBA.
All NBA. Not like all NBA team, just an NBA
But active,
player.
Active player.
Active NBA player. That's a lefty.
Is it a lefty?
Yeah.
It's like
Which direction are they shooting? The head looks like the shoes are facing that way. That's a right hand.
To me, it's a lefty.
If you're standing behind them, look where the shoes are facing. That's the right hand, unless it's a reversed image.
I disagree with you.
Do you guys know right and left?
Yes.
Stand up. Watch.
I'm looking at his shoes right
I'm looking
here.
at his shoes
I'm
too.
looking at the shoes right here. Yeah. Yeah. Lefty right there. All NBA player.
No, his heels are facing in. That means he's facing towards us. It's
I'll
his
just go
left hand.
lefty James Harden. Not James Harden. All right.
But he is lefty.
Okay.
It's not a reverse image.
Huh.
What kind of push shot would that be?
Yeah. Let me see. Who is that?
I feel like the fingers kind of give it away. Like
Finger.
Like the push off.
Oh, because he's shooting with the fingertips and not the whole hand. I got you.
Just like that outline, yeah.
I already know it's not. That's a good one.
Hold on.
I feel like that's one I should know too.
Of course
That
we
maybe
should
like-
know it.
Maybe D'Angelo.
No. All right, we're getting a guess from Boots saying...
I'm not guessing because that's a right-handed shot.
It is not. Mike Conley
I'll
is...
pull up the real picture.
Boots says it's Mike Conley. Is it Mike Conley?
No. Do you want the answer?
No.
Okay.
Because I want to guess it. I said James Harden, no. Mike Conley, no. Is it...
And it's active, right?
Is it a guard? Jalen Brunson?
Yep, that's it.
All right.
Okay.
All right, Jalen Brunson. Who's a lefty?
That's the shot.
Kyle.
Look at the...
I just told you I was looking at the shoes. Yes,
The shoes are facing that way. The arms are in front of his face.
Kyle, it's a
That's a
They're not.
reversed image.
No.
Look, the arms are facing a different way than this.
You're
Look
not
at
going to
that.
convince me. I'm not convincing you. I'm just telling you that's a left-handed shoe
All
right
right.
there. And reverse image is not.
There are plenty of people saying it looks right-handed in the chat.
Do you remember the Phillies did this where they had a batter up, a silhouette of a batter, and there was an intense debate over whether there's a lefty or a righty swing? Intense.
Nonsense.
No, yeah, nonsense that you can't see that that's a lefty shooting there with his feet.
It's not reverse.
Hey, you know. All right, well, let's go. Let's go with the roll call on the Friday.
You do the roll call then, lefty. Here you go. Enjoy.
Let's go roll call, folks. We gotta say what's up to Money Mar out there. Martian Lynch. You got to do the other part with the Money
good.
Mar. Rick M.
This is for
Bootszilla.
lefties only. I'm a righty.
What up, Boots? We got to also go with Jess. Hey, Jess. Winona is in the mix, real time with Prince Blue. Jared in there as well, Martian Lynch. Did I say him? MBD, BD, BF, as Kyle likes to go with all the letters in the name. You got to do the darkness part. I can't do it like you. You got to do the darkness. All right.
Lefties only.
Lefties only.
We need to get Kyle a can of Coors Light here.
You got
He needs to chill.
Darkness. We'll say it like that here in the chat. Flies in 7, Brian Knight, Gene Ross in the mix as well. Who else did we have in there? I didn't see some. Phi Chi is in there. Jay of the Jungle in the mix as always. Who else did we have since I didn't write these down? Jeffrey Stewart. We got to say what up, Jeff Stewart. Who else? Austin Krell making an appearance on a Friday.
No
jumping
free
in there.
promo.
The Hypothetical Man mixed in. Prophet One. And so many people that I hope we did not miss as I scrolled through some of the names since I wasn't prepared for this, since Kyle is bailing on us because we disagree on lefties and righties.
I will dissect this image for you and show you exactly why. It's
Kyle
nonsense.
just threw his controller across the room.
I saw, yeah, exactly. Dom.
No, that was
Dom
you last
Adams.
night staying 2 hours after work trying to beat my high score.
Dom
Dedication
Adams.
is not being angry.
We
That's
appreciate
different.
it. Make sure you go like and subscribe. And when you do, you will hear the bell icon alert. We'll be back on Monday. No Derek. Kyle might
See you
boycott
then.
since I said it was a lefty instead of a righty. Bree is also on vacation, so we'll be down 2 teammates here next week.
All these summertime slackers in here.
All the summertime slackers. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. We will be back with you on Monday beginning at 3 p.m. Bree, thank you. Derek, have a great vacation. We'll see you all on Monday. Have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
We all silly like the mayor.